Good morning, everybody. My name is Jake Johnston. This is Jake's Showcase. I do videos on Wednesdays. Today's date is March the 7th, 2015, and today marks the 5th continuous year of my sobriety. And today is going to be my longest video, and it's going to be my final video on quitting alcohol and drugs. I'm going to break it down into three sections. The first third of the section, I'm going to talk about my life drinking. Second third, I'm going to talk about what happened to me once I quit drinking this time. And the final third will be about strategies and suggestions that I found to be effective in my process, and I'll have a concluding message. The reason I don't want to continue to do alcohol and drug videos on YouTube is because I want to keep it special. I have a playlist at the bottom of my channel, which is now, this will be the 15th video on it, and I have it subsected down into certain areas, and I don't want to dilute it because I feel like it's a very important topic, and I feel like it's something that people struggle with, like myself, and by putting out too much stuff, it just kind of cheapens it, if you will. So this will be the last thing. Now, I may be available for public presentations. You can contact me at jakesshowcase@gmail.com, and the contact information is on my YouTube channel page. So, to begin with, let's see. So, basically, I grew up in an Irish, German, Scottish family. The percentages are sort of mixed, but it's pretty close mixture between the three different families that I came from. And I was the oldest child in a family of 9. And I was very, very small. I was unusually, a tiny guy, but I was very, very intelligent and bright and gregarious. I had a lot of love as a child, somewhat due to my sickness and difficulty in growing, because most of my brothers and sisters ended up being a lot taller than me. And what I remember is basically growing up in this Irish family is that all the adults, when I was a little kid, all the adults a lot of times would be tense, right? A lot of times adults, the parents have friends over, aunts and uncles, and they would be quiet and tense, so, because a lot of stuff would be going on, and it seemed like whenever they would start drinking these bottles of beer or wine or whiskey, the life would start, right? So as a kid, I'm standing there and I'm watching like these adults, and it always seemed to be the same way. I loved these adults and I would love to talk. I was always very talkative, always asking them questions, but a lot of times they'd go from being in a bad mood, right, to once they started drinking, they would be laughing and happy and funny, and it was great. So, as a kid, I grew up with the sort of like the notion that, the good times happen whenever they drink this stuff. And I didn't know what it was. I'm just a little kid. I'm about 5 or 7 years old watching this happen. And it didn't seem to matter where we went, like if we would go to a relative's house or if we would go to, other people's houses. Whatever was in this drink that these people would be drinking, once that started happening, the good times were about to start. Maybe music, dancing, could be anything. A lot of musicians in our family. We had guitar players, fiddle players, bass players. So that was part of the whole thing in the Irish dance, but it was all started from the drinking. Before that, a lot of times it'd be tense and running around and maybe scolding you and this and that. But this magical drink, whatever these adults were drinking, seemed to really, really change their personality. So I watched this again and again and again. I love it when people come over, but I loved it especially once they started drinking, because that's what would make them happy. I may have had a sip of beer when I was a little kid from my father. I thought it tasted terrible. I have to be honest with you. I might be, 4, 5 or 6 or something like that. I might have had a little taste or something like that. But I couldn't understand why these people would drink this stuff. But the first time I decided I was going to drink was when I was 7 years old. I was on my Holy Communion, my first communion, and there was going to be a party for my first communion, and people were going to come over, and I was very, very small, so the counters were really, really high. And a lot of times, what people would do is they would drink their wine and they'd put it down, go for a walk, and go pick something up and pick up their wine. So a lot of times there was like these empty or half drinking, wine cups and beers all around the house, right? And on my Holy Communion, the party for me, I thought, I'm gonna try to drink some of this stuff. And I went around and I grabbed the little cups that were somewhat full or medium full or just even a little couple drops, and I would try to drink it. And so I started drinking wine, and as that day went on, I was able to drink little cups here and there of this wine, and I ended up getting extremely drunk, right, as a 7-year-old kid. So drunk, in fact, that they didn't know what was the matter with me. I was just acting extremely goofy and this and that. But I couldn't even blow out the cake that they had made for me, some sort of happy communion cake, and I couldn't even pay attention. I was being boisterous. Or my father sent me up to my room, and in my room I would jump up against the walls, and I was just banging up against the mattress. I put the mattresses up so I could bang up against them, and then eventually I came up and checked on me, and they had no idea what was going on with me. But the truth was that I had gotten drunk at 7 years old. So that was my first experience drinking. I ended up passing out that day, and so I really didn't drink. I really didn't know too much about drinking. I may have had a little taste here or there, but that's the first time that I really remember getting drunk. And as time went on, I was having a lot of hard times in school because of my really small size. I would get picked on a lot, and I always found school to be really hard. And it was a lot different than my home atmosphere, where I was sort of really important. I was the oldest. I was sort of special. I was really loved. And then I would hit the school, and the school didn't like me, or the class kids, would point out my differences. So there was a real discrepancy for me going from a homing love environment into a very sort of confrontational environment, and it was really, really hard on me, and it continued to affect me, pretty much throughout all of my school. And so I don't really remember drinking too much until I hit about the 6th grade. And in the 6th grade, we would go down to Philadelphia every summer. Our family, my mom would go down to Philadelphia. That's where she was from, and basically we would spend our summers there, and we'd spend our winters in Canada, where I'm located now, in London. And basically, when I would go down there, the kids down there were much more receptive to me, and I was more part of the social crowd. And then around the 6th grade, there was sort of the same sort of experimenting that I had done maybe 7 or 8 years earlier, with sipping beers and wines, maybe stealing a beer and bringing it out to the field and drinking it together. And I loved it. We were being bad. We were being rebellious. We were being things we weren't supposed to do, hiding it, right? And this progressed as the years went by, where when I would go down to the States, that's where I would get a chance to sort of drink with friends. And I loved it, right? So I felt like I had friends, and the beer made me feel good, always made me feel extremely warm and very, very laugh a lot. And one good thing about me is that I was sort of a happy drunk. I find that there's two different types of people who are drunks. There's either the happy drunk or there's the violent drunk. And fortunately for me, and I don't know if it was a cause of me getting beat up one time, I never went the violent route, and I was always sort of a goof, if you will, as a drunk. And so basically, I would a lot of times in Canada, what I would do is my mom used to keep the wine up by the basement stairs, down by my basement, up on this cupboard, right, that was on the stairwell. And I knew that. I knew where the beer and alcohol was kept. And basically, I had access to it all the time. And as I moved into high school and stuff like that, a lot of times I would take cups of wine, and then I would refill it with water to make it look like it hadn't been touched. But I might drink half a bottle of a large bottle of wine. I get hammered, right? we were poor, so it was always a hard time for me to obtain, you know, enough money, and I would have a lot of part-time jobs, you know. And I remember in high school I would work at a movie theater, and always one night a week, you know, either on a Friday night or on a Saturday night, I would dedicate that I was going to go out, you know, and get drunk. And in high school in Canada, anyway, the drinking age is less. It's like 19, at least here, and in the States it's 21. So, you know, we would find places where we could sneak into bars, where bars would like leave the back door open and they wouldn't ID or they wouldn't really bother you. And I was tiny, but man, could I drink all the dances. I would get drunk. I never got kicked out of a school dance. But we would drink outside of the dance, and we would drink after the dance. And I got to the point where I was sneaking booze into the dance, and you know, drinking it there. So just learning how to conceal it, learning how to sneak it around. But I was always able to keep good grades. And you know, one of the keys to my success story was that, you know, I would only drink one night a week. I would drink on the weekend, either on a Friday night or on a Saturday night. Right? But I wouldn't drink on both nights because I had to do my homework, right? And I was a top flight student. I really took to school, mostly because I had such a hard time excelling in other things. Like, I was naturally bright, but the natural brightness sort of, you know, topped out at a certain level, and then I turned into a real kind of like a nerd, right? A super nerd, kind of identifying myself with this school. Always the top mark, or I was always the third place. I was never the top mark. I was always like third place. But it was enough for me to win numerous scholastic awards and be recruited by a number of different colleges. I even at one point was considering going to Harvard Business School because I had a real inkling to get a master's in business from the top university in North America or in the world, in fact. And so I had an inkling to get one from Harvard. And I opted up for the top school in Canada. That's what I had initially planned on doing, which happened to be in my home city. So basically, in high school, I would get drunk a lot. In the summertime, I would drink pretty much every night. We would have keg parties, or we'd go down, have first it started at parties in the forest, because you couldn't really have people at houses drinking. And we would start, and we'd hide in the bushes, and we'd play basketball, and we'd always have, you know, somebody would be able to get a 12-pack or 2-4. And you have to remember, when you're younger, you can't drink as much because you're not used to it, and you're smaller, right? So, you know, for me, like 6 beers was like, you know, tons and tons and tons of beers, and I'd be totally hammered, and you get a huge hangover. And one thing I learned when I was drinking young is that you want to drink the high-end beers, because what I learned is that when you drink the low-end beers, the ice beers, the crappy beers, or the cheap beers, right? Yeah, it's true, you get drunk for cheap, but you get worse hangovers, right? And so basically, the higher end your beer goes, and I always got Heineken, right? At the end, it used to be John the Bat Classic when they made it here, but they stopped making it, and I kept searching around. I would always buy the high-end beer, and I would buy the high-end beer mostly because I didn't want as much of a hangover. And when you started drinking, as you'll see, the volumes that I started to drink, you know, it really made a big difference. So basically, I was able to hang on to some sort of sense of normality, and I would get scolded when I would get caught drinking at some like these Christmas parties from my parents, or you know, where's the wine? And you know, it would be sort of a confrontational thing, but I was still living at home, and I was still, you know, keeping the grades good enough, and I was still hanging in there. And then I went to university, and I took on the scholarship that I had won. I had won a full scholarship to a school which was going to be a precursor to the business school I was going to go to. And again, that first year, I did great in school, or I did good enough. Like, I was still getting straight A's, and I was you know, I was a teacher's pet, and things were going good. But I wasn't going out. I was doing the same pattern, right? I was making sure that I only went out one night a week. And I was jealous of everybody, because it seemed like every night these guys would be going out and partying, getting laid, and this and that. And I'm like this little nerd guy who has like no or very, very little experience with women. And I always had wanted to do that. I never got invited to like these big parties in high school and stuff like that. So I really felt like an outsider, and I continued to be this outsider. But I had this vision that I was going to be a stockbroker down in the States, and I wanted to be the best stockbroker. I had sort of watched a lot of movies and believed that, you know, stockbrokers really had an inside track, and I wanted to be rich, right? So I wanted to be rich, and I was going to use, you know, wealth and fame eventually through school, right, to sort of supersede all of these things that I missed out on in high school. And well, anyway, that summer, after the end of the first year, I ended up getting one of these intern jobs down in Philadelphia for a really good brokerage firm, Morgan Stanley. And in Morgan Stanley, it was considered the top, or the second top brokerage firm, and it still is considered one of the top brokerage firms in the world. And when I got this job, I ended up getting with the top stockbroker, the second top stockbroker in the whole brokerage firm. He was the highest flying riser. And through that process, I started to realize what the reality of stockbrokers did. And I have to say, I was very unimpressed. It blew my mind. These guys were cold calling. They were, you know, pushing stocks that, you know, they either didn't really care about, or a lot of sort of shady stuff going on. And I felt like these guys aren't the wealth of knowledge of the inside track on anything, right? This is a grind mill of call centers and scamming people. And I was really disillusioned as a young 20-year-old or 19-year-old. And so when I went back to school, I really had lost all interest in being a stockbroker. So, you know, so my vision had been disillusioned, and so therefore my motivation to, you know, really super excel at school and hence hold back on the partying was eliminated. And so that year I decided, you know what, I'm lighting it up. I'm joining like these football parties, and I'm going to like these wing nights, and I'm going to all these bars. And the town I live in is a very big college town, right? There's always except for Tuesday nights, there's always there's something, there's a party to go to, there's a bar to go to, there's a special on, and people go to it, right? All the pre-drinking and stuff like that. And basically, when I was drinking, I was gregarious and happy, and basically I was able to have groups of friends, and I was able to join in, and the dorm liked me, and because I was kind of a freak, because I was like this smart guy, but then I was this little guy, and then I was like this big, huge drinker, and kind of like funny, because it was like people couldn't believe how much I could drink. And I would party every night. I loved it. I wanted to go out, be blacking out, be passing out in the dorm rooms. I was getting in trouble by the RAs, and I would stop going to class, right? And the teachers didn't understand what was going on, because I was like this A student. I went down to like an F student, right? But I was determined to get out there and party. I remember being at this one house party. You know, I ended up waking up and, you know, totally, you know, butt naked on a couch. And you know, one problem I used to have, or I did have, was I used to pee myself, right? Like, you know, I would be drinking a lot, and I'd end up peeing myself. It was pretty regular. I was real small, and, you know, I'd be drinking all night, and my bladder just couldn't hold it. And so it was really embarrassing, because I'd be like this, you know, this guy in his 20s who's wetting himself because of his drinking, right? And I did have a bit of a bedwetting problem when I was like a little kid, but it sort of went away. But when I started drinking again, it really came back, because it's like I didn't really care, and I would just be excreting, and that continued throughout all of my drinking, and eventually it even ended up where I started crapping myself, and, you know, just making a disaster out of it. So I ended up getting kicked out of school and losing my scholarship in that pre-business school plan that, you know, I had. And you know, I didn't really give a crap. I was done with school, thought it was a joke. And you know, here I was, you know, I found out I was screwed, because I didn't have a college degree, and at the same time I had this huge college debt, and you know, I kept drinking, right? And So basically, my drinking escalated, and it continued to escalate, where I ended up getting kicked out of my parents' house, and I started struggling trying to find places to live. But I would always have an apartment, and I would always have a sort of a job just to get by. But I was always poor, but somehow I was always able to find enough money to have a 2-4. If not every night, every other night, right? Eventually, I ended up getting into U-Brew at the very tail end before my first rehab, right? Where I would go and buy. You can buy like a keg, and you have to bottle it yourself, or half a keg or a keg or something like that. And I was going back to this thing all the time. And the guy, I'll never forget the guy who was this big red man who was handling like this thing. He said, "Man, for a little guy, I never seen nobody drink so much. Like, you drink the most out of any of the people at the U-Brew," right? Because I was coming back and forth frequently, right? And I was on a bicycle or on buses, so I was a dedicated, hardcore drinker, right? I'd have the bottles. I would find a way to find the money to get myself enough beer to get toasted that night, right? Every night, right? Smokes and beer. That's all I needed, man, and I was happy. That feeling inside of me of feeling good, feeling accepted, and feeling intelligent, and feeling sexy, and feeling the man, all these things, right? It happened when I would drink, right? And when I didn't drink, I felt terrible, right? And I didn't know I didn't know what else to do except to drink more, right? I ended up going down the States. I did end up graduating from college eventually, and I don't know, I basically tried to blank out any other thing about partying, even though I would drink pretty steady. And I ended up getting just a degree, a regular old degree, and I moved back down the States again, where I got a job at a bank, and I went sort of back to my old pattern of just drinking on the weekends, one night a week, whereas the other night a week I would try to sort of prepare for work, and I was doing good. My money was going up, and I knew I had a problem. I knew I had a problem because before I left Canada, I ended up going to a real fancy rehab, which was the first of 9 rehabs that I ended up going to when I was 20 or 21. I ended up going to this real fancy rehab, and I just thought, this is a joke. These rehabs are a joke, and the reason they're a joke is because people all here who really want to drink. You can't tell me that they don't want to drink. And basically, I would argue on the definition of alcoholism, because I felt like because of how undefined it was, and I still feel this way, that it doesn't exist. It's rather sort of a human sort of construct. And so because of that, I didn't want to sort of say, everybody's got to say, "Hi, my name is," and I'm an alcoholic. I would never say that. Right? I would always say something like alcohol or something that sounded like that, but I'd never say it, right? And eventually, because you had to sign off to say that you were in order to graduate, I wouldn't sign. I couldn't graduate that thing. And I thought, I'm way smarter than all these guys, these psychiatrists and all that stuff. And a lot of psychiatrists really thought I was highly intelligent. I would make a lot of really, really good points. So I ended up going back drinking. I never stayed sober more than 11 days after going to one of these rehabs, right? I don't really think that, I don't think that the rehabs, so that's me. 11 days is the most I ever stayed sober after going to a rehab. And so when I went to the States, I had this job, and I really started to progress, and I would get hammered. And everybody knows when Jake's drinking, because he's the life of the party, and he's the jerk of the, not the jerk, or just almost like the clown, because of how like crazy and wild, and I'd be the only one dancing on the dance floor. I remember I reinvented this one bar. It was a sit-down bar, and because the dance music would come on, and I was from like this town with all these clubs, I would end up pushing all the tables away and doing all this dancing and trying to encourage people who were mostly a sit-down drinking place to dance, and eventually it caught on, and people liked this dancing idea, right? And I remember, this is just how it would go every weekend. I had to make sure that I got out there and tried to dance and tried to, socialize and be cool and be fun and have some fun and let all my banking energy out. And so it was always like this contrast between like this nerd guy and this wild party animal, right? But eventually, as I started getting, I got some promotions and I started making some more money, feeling a lot more confident. I started drinking more, right? I started drinking a couple nights a week, right? Usually on Friday and Saturday, and I might even have a couple sips there on the during the week, maybe, but I knew I had this problem because I knew when I started drinking, I wanted to go the whole distance. I wanted to drink every day, right? So I was always holding myself away from drinking, right? And eventually, like these crazy, situations, because I wasn't at my top form. I'd be all numb, right? I'd be all, like white and numb coming into work, and I couldn't really pay attention, and it basically, I was slipping, right? I was slipping more and more, and it was because of how hard I would party on the weekends, where it's like I'd blackouts and peeing yourself and, just not remembering what happened. And, from time to time I would get picked up and thrown in the drunk tank. And, it was a wild time. I ended up losing my job, right? Because one thing I found is, even though I was getting super drunk, I wasn't really having much success with girls. I felt like I was. I felt like I was attractive, this and that. But, everybody else was going and hooking up at the end of the bars and stuff like that, but I wasn't. So it wasn't really helping me in that area. And I was really frustrated, right? So here I was. I wasn't going out with girls when I was sober. I wasn't going out with girls when I was drunk, but I was convinced that if I just drank enough, if I was just fun enough, just wild and crazy enough, I would find, a girl, because I felt more afraid and more wild and crazy, right? Well, I ended up losing that job because, because of sort of performance or whatever, just basically the bank could see that, I was a bit, off the top there, and, I was sort of a key representative. I was a manager. I was at the time, and, I just was not, even though I was young and smart and charming and nice and actually extremely good at sales. I was the top salesman for the area. But the truth is that I was a drunken dude, right? I was a drunk off the set, right? And I was a liability at some point, right? And they knew that, so they made some excuse and got rid of me. And I ended up coming back to Toronto. And in Toronto, I didn't last too long in Toronto either, because Toronto was frickin' nightlife, and there's lots of bars and partying and ladies, and, my friend who was housing me, he told me as soon as I got there he wanted me to quit drinking, but I was a hardcore drinker. I had nothing to do with that. I wouldn't listen to him. Nobody could tell me to quit drinking, right? Nobody, right? My father told me to quit drinking. My friends told me to quit drinking. My teachers had told me to quit drinking. Whatever sort of school counselors and, people. My bosses had told me to quit drinking, right? I'm not going to quit drinking, man. That's what I do. Jake equals drinking. That's it. I equal drinking. If you don't like it, see you later. I'm going to drink. Thank you very much, and I am never going to stop. I'm never going to stop until I am in the ground, because I stand for drinking. That is my flag of honor, is that I drink, right? And I will always drink. And this is my attitude, right? Because I felt like, who could say that this person doesn't want to drink when they really do, right? How could you deny that you don't want to drink when you really do? And that was my attitude. How could you say that you had all like these problems? Because you're basically going with what you want to do, right? And so this is why nobody could tell me nothing. And when I went to Toronto, it was more of the same. I only lasted about a month, or maybe 6 weeks there, right? Because my friend was like, this guy's out of control, because I was drinking every night, right? And I was supposed to be doing some sort of like a business thing or something for him, and I was sort of getting it done, but just the wild nights that I would have in Toronto. Now I had money and I had access to this huge big city that was wild, and so I ended up going back to my hometown and living in a hotel, because again, at this point, the family had basically didn't know what to do with me. And even though I was on and off with my family, it was basically, they had made it pretty clear that they didn't want me drinking, and I had made it pretty clear that I was going to be drinking. And so it was a highly tense thing, and I ended up missing a lot of special events because of that. I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I was supposed to be the best man at my other sister's wedding and my best friend's wedding, and I was under a court thing to be in a rehab, right? And I couldn't go to that, and so I missed a lot of special baptisms and stuff like that, and I couldn't go to these things, or I wasn't invited to go to these things, or available to go to these things due to something to do with drinking. So it was a very painful thing to miss some of these key moments in life, but I didn't really care. I like drinking. That's what I like to do. I like to party. I like to drink. I like to get my freak on. That's what I like to do. That's what I did, right? And so basically after that, I ended up bouncing a little bit back and forth. I ended up in a great university job. I drank my way out of that. That lasted about 4 months. I was in this high-level Pennsylvania University pathology department, and I was a financial administrator. It looked like real promising. Again, if I could just cut back on the drinking, but I'm making money, I'm feeling prestigious, I'm feeling like my life's on track again. So what do? I hit the bottle again. And what does that lead to? I get in crap again, and I ended up getting dropped again, sort of as a liability to the university, or potential liability to the university, right? And so this was my pattern again and again. I couldn't hold the job, right, of any merit, and I ended up coming back to Canada for good, or at least for good for the moment. And I ended up living in sort of like these low-end houses. I went to a couple rehabs here. I went to a couple in the States, and I ended up living in like these low-end houses down by where the drug use are, where the methadone clinic was. And I never really got in no fights. That's one thing. I had a home invasion once, but my default was always to give, because of my bullying when I was a kid. It was always to give whatever the bully wanted, right? So like if they want cigarettes, you give them cigarettes. If they want money, they want money. If they want, I don't know, your VCR, you just give them the VCR, whatever. But because I'm so tiny, I couldn't defend myself. I never could defend myself, right? And I knew that. It was the default for survival was to give, right? To give what they want and try to minimize the damage. If I did get beat up, you always turtle and wait until hopefully they give up and feel like you're beat up good enough, and hopefully you're alive. And but I never really got in fights. I did get a gun pulled on me once, right? That was pretty scary in my drinking days. And I did end up in some very hairy situations. I saw a fella commit suicide, and I was in like these rooming houses, and it was just terrible stuff that you end up doing, because you get lower and lower, and end up sort of becoming friends with and interacting with like the low end of the society, basically, right? Where people are going around getting their money just for their booze, like you, and you're getting lower and lower, and sometimes you end up so I end up in this place, and I end up after about a year of drinking, I ended up starting a house fire, right? I ended up starting a house fire, which was because it was so cold in the city, and the landlord wouldn't put on the heat. I would put on the stove, and one day with the stove being on, it caught on fire on this electrical cord, and I passed out thinking it was finally warm out. It was finally warm in my apartment, but my whole house was on fire. And the fire department ended up kicking in and saving my life from being roasted. Most people think it's smoke, but I smoke a lot, and I just like the smell of smoke, and I was just sitting there and just thinking, finally I'm warm, right? Now, the whole house is burning down, and the door that they almost, I was totally passed out, and I just woke up in an ambulance. So I've been in the hospital probably, a lot of times. Sometimes, the cops would bring me, sometimes the ambulances would bring me, sometimes people who knew me would bring me, right? And you know, it was usually once every couple months I'd be going to these hospitals, you know, for one reason or another. One time I might get smashed up at a bar or something like that, right? And anyway, so things were terrible, and finally I decided, you know, I was going to go. After that apartment, the fire marshal said I couldn't live there, and I begged him to let me live there because I had nowhere else to live. And I was having terrible hallucinations, and I was having terrible situations in this sort of drug house that I was living in. And I ended up going to a detox and staying at the detox, which is at the homeless shelter, for a week. I ended up going to detox 2 times, it might have been 3 times, and they ended up banning me because of how bad of a drunk I was, saying that they couldn't handle me, right? And you know, I'd never heard of that happening, and you know, so I ended up going to another rehab, trying to find a room, just always trying to find enough money to get, you know, survive and stay sober long enough to get enough money to be able to get some more. Pretend you're going to quit, you know, tell people you're going to quit drinking. You're not going to quit drinking. You're going to fake you're going to quit drinking until you can basically stabilize your money situation, and then you can start drinking again, because we love drinking and that's what we want to do. So basically I would go from job to job, and I ended up you know, in this apartment drunk. This apartment here, drunk 7 or 8 years ago or something like that, and I would go in and out of drinking here, right? So I would have people over. I would, you know, you make a few friends that are all using you, because I was the kind of guy who would buy people drinks and have the party at my place, right? So I had friends, because otherwise I didn't really have any friends, and they wouldn't come over. So I'd have beers and have people over, and you know, try to have me as the sort of centerpiece of the party. And you know, for a lot of times, as long as you got lots of beer and you're willing to pay for free drinks, people are willing to come. So I ended up deciding to quit for 1 year, right? 1 year, to prove that I could quit for a year. Because in all these AA meetings, and I maybe went to 1,500 AA meetings, something like that, 2,000 AA meetings. I went to a lot of meetings. I read the book a whole bunch of times, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I basically had problems with a lot of the book, even though I could recognize some of the stories in my own self. I just had a lot of problems with the steps, and I did all the steps at one point in one of the rehabs to sort of again prove that I could, you know, I tried to do it, and you know, the steps and stuff like that, and plus the interactions with the other AA members oftentimes lead to confrontations. And I think the final point was when one of the gay guys who wanted to be my sponsor he was gay, and I didn't know, and he was trying to hit on me. He was trying to get my pants, if you will. And I thought, you know what, this is crazy, right? So that was the last time I sort of went to AA, is when I had the guy here, and he's hitting on me, trying to, you know, I was like, what is this? Anyway, so I quit for 1 year, and I promised myself I was going to prove I'd get 1 year sober, right? And I did. I got 1 year exactly sober. I ran into, you know, I basically, I got 1 year sober. I was able to do it just to prove it. I white-knuckled it, as they call it. White-knuckled it through it. And the Canadian Olympics were coming on, and the hockey was coming on. I got this huge thing about sports. Huge sports fan, and I like, you know, all the major sports: basketball, baseball, hockey, football, right? Canada is hockey, right? And basically the other sports are all American, right? And I got American teams to cheer for. And you know, basically for me, sports was so good because they're always advertising beer, and you know, it's sort of part of the party. Is you drink, watch sports, cheer for your team, you know. And you know, I took to it like Luke, because I love sports, I love beer. You know, all you need is a hot girl and you're all set, right? I mean, life's perfect. And so I really took to the sports, and I planned that, okay, well, once the Canadian Olympics comes on, I'm going to get hammered. And it just so happened that it lined up perfectly for 1 year from then. So 1 year to the minute, to the second, I think I waited like 11 seconds later, and I hit the bottle again, right? I got hammered, right? For weeks, right? For weeks and weeks. when I went drinking towards the end, it was not a short-term affair. It was a long-term affair, right? Because I would pre-plan. I would have hundreds of bottles ready to go, so I didn't run out of booze. And you know, and I would either have people over, and I just would order in. I would order the beer always in, so I didn't have to go to such a pain in the ass to go. I didn't have a car or nothing like that. And so the last time I went drinking, I think I drank about 500. I think I drank about 525 beers in a row. And you know, I drank. You know, I had learned how to drink Listerine, and I had learned how to drink, you know, whiskey, wine. It didn't really matter. But I was basically like 99%, 95%. I was always beer, right? Heineken. In fact, I carry Heineken with me. I have wine here, and I have alcohol here. I'll get into that in a few minutes. So basically, I was watching. I was so drunk. I was so drunk as usual. You know, I not unshaven, can't go to the bathroom because you got no food in you for weeks, right? Just a real skinny mess that didn't want to do nothing except drink more. And I'd have friends come over, try to talk me into quitting drinking, and you know, I'd just tell them no, try to offer them. I would drink with them, maybe a beer or something like that, but. And it got to the point where it became real apparent that this was a sort of a life and death situation, as it had been in the past. But it was getting, you know, it was just, you know, I was just a disaster, right? Like just there was everywhere you see here in this apartment was filled with beer bottles, right? First thing I'd do is go drink a beer, and I had timed out how much to, you know, ice it, and when I needed more, how many I needed for the day, and it was just a terrible situation. And so. On March the 7th of 2015, it was actually 2 days before, I think it was March the 5th, that I was in my bathroom there one day, and I thought to myself, you know what, man? You got a choice. I looked up in the sky and I saw sort of a flash, which at the time I thought was God, but in hindsight I think it might have been a satellite that happens to be in a certain spot, but it seemed like a star flashed. And that star, or satellite, or whatever, it sort of triggered off sort of like this thought process in my head. That, you know, you had lived my life, I had lived a good part of my life sober, and I had lived a good part of my life drunk, and I couldn't keep going back and forth with this, right? I had to either pick the drunk life, or I had to pick the sober life. Right? I couldn't go sober life, drunk life, back and forth, and I had to pick one, right? And I thought a lot about. And my whole life flashed before my eyes, right? Like I saw myself as a kid, I saw myself as a teenager, I saw myself with all this hope and promise and intelligence and gregariousness, and, you know, girls actually liked me a lot when I was a little kid, but then, you know, as I hit puberty and they hit puberty, it just sort of fell off. But, you know, I saw myself, and then I saw myself in like these drunken situations and in trouble and this and that, and I basically had a decision to make. Which way am I going to live, Jake? Which way do I want to live, right? And I just knew that the next time I got sober, right, that was going to be it. I wasn't going to be joking with anybody or making a scene or making a show or something like that. You know, it was for me. Right? It was for me to quit drinking, how I was going to live my life, regardless of the consequences and regardless of how hard it was going to be. I just didn't want to go back and forth anymore, right? So it took a lot of resolve, and it started on that Thursday night. It was, you know, very, very late Thursday night, and then on the Saturday, it was hockey night in Canada, and I was still drinking. I still had lots of money and beer and stuff like that. Not lots, but I had money, beer, this and that. Friends came over, and they're like, oh, again, trying to get me to quit drinking, right? And I said, listen, fellas, I ain't quitting drinking tonight. There's no way. The Leafs are playing against Sidney Crosby, and, you know, I'm watching a damn game. I'm staying hammered tonight. But when I wake up in the morning, that's going to be it. And so the next day, I woke up, and I saw the sun, and I thought, you know what, today's the day. I'm not drinking anymore. and I think I had about eight or 10 beers in the fridge here, right? And every morning I would always be getting up, and first thing you do, no matter if it's 6 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever time, as soon as you wake up, you crack a beer. But this was going to be the day I wasn't going to do it, and I held off. And I wasn't going to call anybody either. I was going to wait until somebody contacted me. And later in that day, my friend came over, and he tried to bring me over a coffee. And when I had a little bit of this coffee, you got to remember I hadn't drank it for so long, right? That I hadn't eaten anything else except beer or Listerine or wine or anything like that for so long, for maybe almost a month, right? That it sort of put my system into shock. And so we ended up going to the hospital again, right? It was almost like they had a Jake department. I had been in the psych ward. I had been locked down, like what they call where they tied you down. They had needled me before. I'd been on life support. So the hospitals knew who I was. I was like, I don't know how long my medical record would be, but it would be really, really, really long. And, for at least the last, 10 years of it would be predominantly stuff to do with, being intoxicated. So I'm in there again, and I was basically on life support, right? I remember that they used to have to monitor my heart and, stuff like that, and give me oxygen. And it's amazing I survived all these things. I didn't really die, from all these situations. But there I was, yet again, trying to make another sort of sober up time period. And the last time I got sober, it took a really, really long time, right? More longer than usual to go through the withdrawal symptoms. I estimate it to be 6 weeks. Right now, I know normally they say after 2 weeks it's over, but and a lot of times when I would quit drinking, it would be 2 weeks, give or take, maybe a little bit less than 2 weeks. But this last time it was really long. And when we're talking about the withdrawal symptoms, we're talking about the hallucinations, right? You start getting a lot of, or at least what happened to me, I had some of the worst hallucinations you'd ever seen. I only acted on them once. One time, I heard like these voices in my head, and I ended up phoning my landlord and saying something that I had heard in my head and taking it as a fact and telling my landlord. But all the other times I was able to sort of just hear it in myself. Like, you can't sleep. I would see things. I would see bugs. I would see bugs on me. I would hear the hockey games, music. Just your mind is out of control, right? Your mind it's out of control. It's not based in reality. It's absolutely terrifying what happens, right? It's hell. It's hell. Sobering up, and you're physically, you're still not there because of course your body can't eat, so you have no food, and it just doesn't know what's happening. Your alcohol has been withdrawn from you, right? And so your one thing that's been consistent is not there anymore, and your body doesn't know how to react. Not only that, but it wants it, and it knows it can have it back, and if you have it back, you get rid of all this stuff. And so it was absolutely terrible. It was absolutely terrible for 6 weeks, and that's just like the physical stuff, right? And basically, as you slowly start to get food in you and start eating again, and get normal. What I would do is I'd play basketball and play guitar, right, to sort of like stay normal, right? Not to mention you're poor, right? So I needed to get a job. So your whole life is sort of in this massive crisis, right? It's in this massive crisis when I was getting sober, and it's such a bad thing to have happen. I ended up getting a job. I would always be able to get a job, usually a couple weeks, but I would never be able to keep them. But this one particular job I got at a call center, and it was I was able to keep it for about 1.5 years, and then the call center moved the contract down to. I was a pretty good worker. I've always been a good worker. When sober, I'm always like one of the more. I'm one of the top employees, but I'm a real sort of, I can be like a real confrontational sort of guy because I'm highly competitive, and you know, I a lot of times I come across that I think I'm better than everybody else, and you know, I want to beat everybody. I'm a very highly competitive fella, right? I'm an insular kind of guy, like I was at school and at sports. But it's just sometimes in a business community it doesn't go over well. So I never really got along great with my coworkers. But for me, I was making money and I was staying sober. So for a year and a half, I had gotten myself sober. I basically had abandoned the AA meetings and the counseling, and I wasn't doing anything except learning how to stay sober. Just now. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever, however many days, and start to piece these numbers together. And what happened was so things started getting a little bit better, right? I started making some money, started eating. I started thinking, well, I got money now. I got, you know, I'm like trying to eat better. I've got a lot more focus on physical health. The thing I'm missing is girls. I don't have a girlfriend. So why don't I have a girlfriend? I ended up studying like why and watching a lot of basketball and sort of admiring basketball players and wishing like, wow, like look at how, you know, good they do, and trying to emulate some of the stuff that they do. Like they like to they work out. They're very physical, right? And so I tried to start learning how to work out and this and that. And I started reading stuff about how to ask girls out, and I was trying some of this stuff with very, you know, low success. But anyway, it was some sort of a way for me to try to, you know, get some dates and stuff like that. And then after about 2.5 years, I wasn't working again, but I had some money. I ended up falling in love, right? I ended up falling really hard in love, and you know, I hesitate even saying that, but I think it's sort of an important part of the story, is because I fell madly in love, right? And I had found this you know, wonderful woman who I really fell in love with, and she was wonderful. But the problem is that she didn't feel the same way, and it broke my heart, right? And it really broke my heart. Like, I took it extremely badly, and I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated, and it was sort of amplified by the geographic proximity and location, and it became a real difficult thing for me. And while I know a lot of people go through heartbreaks, that's what they say, I just felt like mine was exceptionally difficult. And I think in no small part based on part of it was to do with me trying to get sober. Because getting sober, right, is sort of that thing that makes me feel good, or has always made me feel good. It's always been my sort of fallback to how to sort of ease your pains and stuff like that. And so it really sort of challenged my commitment to staying sober, right? And you know, I still want to drink now, right? And I think I'll always want to drink, like always desire to drink, right? But I don't know if I'll ever drink again. I could turn this camera off and I could start drinking right now, right? I don't know exactly. I always want to drink, but the key is that I'm not drinking, and I'm hoping not. I like doing it this way, right? But the heartbreak was difficult. It was extremely difficult for me because I couldn't really seem to like get away from it, and it was there, and for me, I had to sort of really double and triple and quadruple my resolve that no matter what, I was not going to drink, right? No matter what, I just don't pick up the bottle. Just don't crack open that first Heineken. Don't have a sip. People have wanted me to drink with them and sort of tempted me. Oh, come on, just have a couple drinks. And of course, I want to. Especially if you have the prospects of, hooking up and stuff like that. Like, it's tempting, right? I love the smell of it. I love the taste of it. I love the vibe of it. I love what happens. I know it inside and out. But me personally, I've got to stay away from it, right? Don't even try a little bit there, pal, because it'll just zoom up like it always does, right? So basically, that's basically my story. And my family life has improved quite a lot. That's good. I'm back in very good relations with my family, and it's always it's family life, right? So you got pluses and minuses, but for the most part, I feel like a lot of my gregariousness is coming back, like my happiness and my friendliness, and I was exceptionally good with talking to people, right, from a young age, right, and I feel like that is coming back, and you can see huge strides, right, where I having conversations with strangers, or I'm very good at spotting a person who's having a hard time or feeling bad, knowing what they're feeling and talking to them about it. I'm very good with that, right? It's a gift that I have, is reading and communicating with people, and it's coming back, right? Because I've got roots in Philadelphia. One of the analogies I like to use is the Liberty Bell, right? And so this Liberty Bell is a huge bell that I guess symbolizes America's freedom, and it's this big, huge, giant bell that they have at the center of town, and when if that bell was to be gonged, or if the bell was to be rung, the bell is extremely thick. Maybe I don't know how thick it is, but it's just the biggest, thickest bell you can imagine, right? And if you have a big, thick bell that gets gonged or rung, there's vibrations, right? There's vibrations that happen, and it goes on longer than when it actually hits, right? It vibrates, right? And when you see bells, that's how they operate. So I feel like sort of like my brain, right, was gonged by the booze, right? And it was really gonged really hard, like my soul and my brain and all that stuff. And it really shook you up, right? And it's taken a long time. And it's sort of in a way continues to sort of happen where that those vibrations are coming back to a natural sort of pattern that I've always been in. Right, so one of the sayings I heard is that many years in 10 years into a bush, 10 years out. And I don't know. I would say I drank. I don't know how many years I drank for, but I drank a lot, and a lot of years. And so like my vibrations continue to sort of slow down, and I continue to get back to the real Jake. Right, the real Jake is this guy you're talking to here, right? Who can really talk, and who really likes people, and a little bit of a bad boy, sorta, but for the most part, a real nice, sharp fella who likes people, right? And so you can start to see these things coming back. I got a car about 8 months ago. That's been a huge improvement for me. It's allowed me to get around the town, and it's allowed me to I've had a couple jobs, but some of the jobs just haven't worked out for one reason or another. I still do have a bit of a challenge that way, because even though I feel like I'm a very good worker, I feel like I need to be respected, and I need to be admired. One way I wanted to sort of possibly be like a speaker for people who are alcohol. One of the reasons I don't want to keep talking about it too is because I don't want to always be thinking about alcohol, right? I don't want to always I don't want to maybe be a counselor or something like that, because for me, I want to put alcohol behind me. I want that to be sort of like in a package, and I feel like 5 years is good enough. 5 years, you've got a good established pattern. You've been sober, you've been through the paces a whole lot of times, right? And so 5 years is good enough to put a package on it and say that was part of my life then, and that's not part of my life now, and move on to other things. So the third thing is I'll just give you some tips and techniques of things that I've done that I found to be effective. The first and most important thing, right, of staying sober on a long-term basis is not staying sober on a long-term basis. It's staying sober on the most minute of short-term bases. The nanosecond, right? The right now, the less than right now, the second before and the second after. If you have a hard time sort of envisioning that, right? Some people, what they do is they might think 10 seconds or 5 seconds. Like count to 10, count to 5, or look at the clock. Just wait for 10 more seconds to go, right? Maybe wait for 5 minutes or something like that. It depends on your strength and diligence. But ultimately, it comes down to the present moment, right? Staying sober on a long-term basis is simply staying sober now. And, when you don't know what to do about, how to stay sober today, right? A lot of times repetition is something that will, so if you had success before, if you do the same thing again, you'll have success again, right? So by doing, like, a lot of times people might watch me and say, oh, you're always doing the same thing again and again and again, Jake. Well, a lot of times that's because I know I didn't get sober yesterday. I mean, I didn't get drunk yesterday. I'm sober. So if I do that again, well, guess what? I ain't going to get drunk today, right? Now, there's sort of limits to that because your life changes and you might move, or you might, there might be holidays and you can't do the same exact thing every single day. But when you're upset, or when you're not sure what to do, or when you're not sure what to do, by defaulting to what you do know how to do, like, let's say, for example, playing guitar. Let's say if you promise I'm going to go play guitar for an hour and you don't drink when you're playing guitar, well, go play guitar for an hour, and then that's 1 hour that you got by that you didn't drink. Let's say if you don't drink in a movie theater. I mean, I've drinking everywhere, right? I was the king of sneaking. But so if you go and watch a movie for 2 hours, you just got 2 hours done, right? You're not drinking, right? So the key to staying sober, tomorrow is not tomorrow. You don't care about that, right? You care about now. You don't even care about today. I mean, like I said, I could turn this off, and I've got 18 beers, a bottle of wine, and a pint of whiskey in here, ready to go to light her up, right? But so you never know. I just got worried about this right now, this video, right? And hopefully, the good things will happen going forward, right? And so the key to drinking, or not drugging, is to not drug in the present moment. That's the most important thing, right? That's by far and away the most important thing. Things like, the industry of alcohol and drug quitting. I have to say, I'm not a fan. Okay? I'm not a fan of it being effective. I understand maybe, it sounds nice, we have a nice rehab here, this guy is a good counselor for alcohol and drugs, or, read this self-help book, or, this or that, and this includes people who get, in trouble with the law, where, like, they're on probation or parole and stuff, and they can't, drink or drug. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that because it doesn't actually get you to quit, like, inside of your own head. It might physically, remove you from it, but it doesn't actually make the key core change that you need, which is you. You have to not want to drink no more. You want to live sober again, right? Again, and it is all again. For every single person, no matter how drunk you are right now, you were sober when you were 0 years old, or 1 year old. Right? You were sober. You couldn't drink alcohol, right? I don't know if there is one freak person who was getting fed alcohol since every single day of their life, but I would assume that's not the case. And even if mama was a drunk and you came out and you were actually drunk in your birth, well, after a day or two, the nurses have got to take care of you, right? And they put you in those incubators, and so for at least a couple days, you weren't drunk, right? So there was a moment when you were drunk. So we're all naturally not drunk. we're all naturally grew up most of our lives, right, as not using drugs and using alcohol. We're natural as human beings. We eat regular food and we sleep and we want shelter, right? So these are the things that we have. When you're in elementary school, you're not drinking, right? At least not during the school week. So we all know how to be sober. That's our natural state. Our natural state is sobriety, and so we sort of screw ourselves up in the brain thinking that we can't quit. Right? We can't quit because we identify so much with the drinking and the drugs. And so the industry part of it, right, with the rehabs, the counselors, the self-help books, the judge telling you whatever, can't drink here, there, the next place, and all these things, it's not effective quitting. It's not effective, and because usually what happens is, as soon as those constraints are removed, the person's going to go back. If they're not going back while they're there, I drank in a rehab. I drank a lot in a rehab. I was in this rehab where I figured out a way to sneak beers into the rehab and drink sitting there in the rehab. I would put it in my socks and I'd put it in my laundry basket, and we figure these things out. We figure out we're little sneaky little dudes and ladies who are figuring this stuff out of how to sneak it around the man. So that's why I don't really think any of these things are truly effective, right? The truly effective thing is you making the decision to want to live sober, again, because it is again. We want to live sober again. Some of the harder things for people are something like these holidays. They're very hard. They can be very hard for me. Coming right up, of course, St. Patrick's Day and the Irish roots of me. I love drinking, so St. Patrick's Day is the Irish drinking day, right? So every St. Patrick's Day is a little bit hard, or it's hard. I think the first St. Patrick's Day I had a really good friend of mine come and sit with me, and we just hung out and had some cokes and some ginger ales and cokes and just talked, and it was good. And it's progressively gotten easier for me to get through these holidays. It's still hard though. New Year's is hard. I find New Year's to be hard because everybody's amped up to go. Super Bowls can be hard because I want to drink. Every Saturday night really is hard because you want to go and party too, and going to these bars. I walk around the bars a lot. I very infrequently go into a bar. Right? I like it. I love the bar scene. Right? That's where the hot babes are. Right? That's where you want to see. Right? You want to pick up some girls. You want to go and you meet some hot girls in the bars. But the truth is that it's like the smell and the thing. It's just I'm enmeshed in this sort of remembering and these people say triggers. I don't know, the remembering triggers, whatever you want to call it. And so I don't like it. I find it a little bit hard. I don't really like being there too long. And I might have memories of that particular bar, but I certainly have memories of the whole thing, of the bar scene and going there. So I try to stay away from those places, right? So that's basically you gotta learn how to stay away from situations that you're gonna go, and the holidays can be hard that way. Christmas time can be hard. The 4th of July or Canada Day, they can be hard. The May 2 4 or the anyway, all the holidays, right? All the holidays, people amp up. They're gonna go the barbecue, the drinking, or the sports games, and you love it all. You love it all. You love it more than they do. You really do, right? You can drink 2 or 3 times whatever these people are drinking, and you want to, but you just gotta learn how to lay low, chill out, just another day, right? Valentine's Day, it's not really a drinking day, but that can be a hard day, where you want to have a love, you want to be, a lover or whatever. But so a lot of like these emotional, highly constructed days can be really hard, right? And basically, laying low is a good thing, right? Get yourself doing something else. if you really have to, what I've done is I watch the clock for midnight. Once midnight past 12:01, it's over or it's begun. Like, I'm a big clock guy, right? So use the clock to your advantage. Where if it's a certain amount of hours or days, you sort of do the calculation, and you almost use that like as a point system. It's like you got another point, another minute, another 10 minutes, another hour, or like you got another minute in, and just, or you can either do it like how many minutes left or how many minutes until, and then, by using sort of time to your advantage in sort of a mathematical way, you can get through like these time periods. Parties can be hard too. I mean, obviously these holidays are parties, but there's lots of parties throughout the year, and unlike bars, that it's sort of like the general public, with parties, it's people right? It's people you want to see, right? Maybe somebody you like, right? And you want to see them, right? Because they usually dress up nice, and you dress, So I go to the parties, but I try to leave the parties. I don't stay too long, right? Right? I'd say about an hour and a half. An hour and a half is good enough for Jake. Right? If Jake's there an hour and a half, that's plenty. Especially if it's a bigger party, right? Like, I can hold beer, I can have beer, I have beer here. So beer doesn't have no control over me, right? But the longer you're involved with it, you risk it more, right? So it's like, not risk it, but you're just tempting yourself more, and you're ingraining yourself. I had this one job offer at a bar to be a dishwasher, right? And I needed a job real bad, but the truth was I turned it down because I didn't want to be soaking in beer every night. And, you're tired, you're grumpy, it's late. And so you just got to be sort of smart about that. You got to make, like, staying sober is more important than whatever that party is, or whoever that girl is, or, whatever that situation is. Staying sober is your top goal, whatever the job is. If the job is if they're paying you to go drink, well, you're just telling them no thank you, because that's not what you do. Your life's a lot bigger than that. And so the parties are important, the industry is important, the knowing how to stay sober is important. I think, one thing I heard is, by repeating yourself, it's important. Like, repeat success. So if you went to the coffee shop yesterday at 2 o'clock and you didn't get drunk, well, if you go to the coffee shop today at 2 o'clock, you're probably not going to get drunk again, right? If you go tomorrow at 2 o'clock, next day you're not going to get drunk again because you didn't get drunk the last two. So things like this, these patterns, really key. Or I found them to be helpful. They are a little bit boring, it's true, but it works, right? You get it over with, right? If you gotta go to a meeting, like a lot of times people like going to like these AA meetings or these counseling meetings or whatever they are, and that doesn't get you drunk. Whatever it is that doesn't get you to drink, well, that's a good one, right? Church can be another, and people can really hone in on the religious stuff, right? Oh, I love God and the scriptures and this and that. Hey, you know what? Amen. Whatever. For me, the repetition is key from repeating it, and that helps you get more and more time in. I think as you get really, that's sort of like a good sort of beginner phase. And what I'm hoping now in my life, moving forward anyway, is that, I'd like to see more things happen in my life, right? Like, I'd like to be more successful in a lot of different areas, and I feel like I have a lot more to give people, right? I have a lot more intelligence, I have a lot more brains, I do still want to be very wealthy, rich, right? I still do want to have a lot of friends, and I'm hoping for a special love to maybe come along, and girlfriends, etc. We'll see. That's all up the road, right? But I know that I have more to do, and I know that my patterns are going to shift and change. But for a time period, it's a really good way to get some time in. It's a really good way to get some sort of solidity and some sort of a pattern, so you gain more confidence that you don't always have to be drinking, and you're not always going to be drinking again as soon as the first crisis comes, or the second crisis, or the 10th crisis, right? there's a lot of bad things that can happen in the world out there to you, and they're all going to happen to a greater or lesser extent. The great thing, though, about being sober is that you get to handle all these situations with a lot more of an intelligent, reasoned, rational approach, right? Like you get to sort of make sense out of things, right? You're not going on like these emotional kicks of hate and love and joy and fear, and you're not going up and down and up and down and hung over and feeling great. Like you're not doing any of that, right? You're more even keeled. So you're able to approach these situations a lot more intelligently, right? You're able to think about, maybe business ideas that might work, maybe ways that you can help people. For me, I've really enjoyed this whole YouTube thing, and I wanted to be a big, movie star, TV celebrity, or rock musician, or something like that, And who knows? I might still be, right? These are all things up the road that I got lots of time, but there's other things in life too, right? I think money is really magical. Like, sort of the pursuit of money and finding money and having money and basically being rich. I want to be rich. A rich celebrity. What else? Why would I say I want to be anything else? I want to be a rich celebrity that women love. Right? Wait, there you go. You got it from me. That's what I want to be. Right? So that's what I'm going to try to be. Right? And, and there's going to be caveats and changes to my pattern and my way. But I feel like my journey, because of how bad of a drunk I was, and you can ask any bartender that's ever seen me, or any bar that knows me, or any person that's been aware of Jake and his drinking shenanigans, how terrible of a drunk I was. And I would say that a lot of people would think I would have died, right? Or, they say in AA jails, institutions, and death. And I've been to all of them, and I think I'm sort of one of these guys who kind of rise from the dead, right? I've risen from the dead. I'm reborn. I'm not reborn, but I'm rising from the dead, right? And I'm coming back, right? Slowly and surely. And the last 5 years, establishing myself as a sober man and giving myself the confidence that, I have put this behind me. This is not Jake anymore. This is not Jake Johnston anymore. Jake Johnston is beyond alcohol. I don't know what the percentages of chances of me dying of drinking are. They're probably still pretty good. I've heard that for people who have drinking problems, 97% of people who quit drinking are drinking again within a year. Right, so that leaves only about 3% who actually can quit for a year. And I'm sure that the percentages get worse and worse as the years go by in the macro scale, right, of percentages. So I feel like, I beat the odds, right? And I continue to beat the odds with booze. And because I'm putting this behind me, I also feel like I can beat the odds in a lot of other ways in life too. Odds are meant for the normal. But when you're abnormal, and when you feel like you're a little bit special, like you have a little bit extra, a little bit of an extra spirit, maybe that you've been given to, show the world and shine to the world, I think that things are going to fall together in my life very well, right? It's going to take some time, and, it's going to take some intelligence. It's going to take some talking and thinking and, learning how to get, there's going to be a lot of things I still got to learn how to do. I don't know, family life, that's something up the road for my own self. I don't know if I'll have a family. That's all to be determined, up the road. So, I guess as a conclusion to being 5 years sober today, it's that I feel like I'm a miracle, I feel like these things that they say miracles happen and all that stuff. This is a miracle right here, right? This is a miracle. Being here, being able to sit here and people think, why do you carry all this beer and alcohol with you, Jake? And it's because I want to have people over. When I have people over, I still like being the good host, right? And so I carry it with me, and it also gives me power, right, to say, you know what, booze, you're staying right there. I'm sober. I've got the power, man. I got no constraints or restraints or anything like that. There's no money gap. There's no access problem. It increases my power, right? That's why I have it, right? It increases my power over my choice, over my decision, over the way I want to live, right? And for a little runt guy who, drank himself into the homeless shelters and, the streets and begging and stuff like that, and the life support and the burned out houses and the crack houses and, the terrible situations that I've been in, right? Like, I'm a miracle, right? I'm a miracle. And you can be a miracle too. Yeah, you can do it, man. Or lady. Right? Like, I was the worst. I was the worst in the country. Right? I was the worst that I felt like I was the worst I've ever heard of. I don't know who the worst is, whatever that means, but I was terrible. Right? And I know that we can make these adjustments and changes. It is possible to do it. I'm doing it. I've done it. Right? I've done it for the time being. And I encourage you to do it. Right? Let go of the shackles of alcohol and drugs. Let them off you. Don't let yourself be diluted anymore. That you have to drink and you always drink, and you don't believe that you're different. Yeah, you are different. You're right. Everybody's different, right? And so when you think you're different, and when you think you're the best, and you know you're the best, right, or you feel like you're the best, right? And therefore the drinking and the drugs, you're gonna beat it, and this and that. Well, keep trying to beat it, I guess, But for me, I decided, what? Enough of this. What am I trying to prove? I want to live sober now. I want to be normal, right? I want to deal with the regular life, and I will deal with regular life, right? I will deal with it, in a regular way, right? And I hope that this encourages you, right? If you're seeing somebody, if you see somebody else and you want to help them, one more thing I want to say is about that tough love. Get rid of it. I hate tough love. Tough love is not love. Tough love is being a jerk. Right? Help people. Help people who want to be helped as best you can. Right? And love is love. Right? Tough love is not love. Tough love is some sort of bizarre way, I hate to say it, for people to be greedy. Right? People to be greedy in themselves and not have to do anything and feel like they're better than whoever the problem is. Love is love, right? Always support your people, right? Always stick with your people. Don't dump them in the gutter. Don't disown them. Don't, shut the doors on them. Work with people. It's all about working with them, Be better. So tough love, thumbs down. Big thumbs down from Jake, right? Love, thumbs up. Big thumbs up from Jake, right? Our lives are miracles in themselves. We run into tremendous problems and troubles. All of us out there, all of us who have had these troubles and difficulties, we can make the change and we can make the difference in our lives first and in the world second, right? But it's all about us doing it right now, all right? I want you to stay sober today if you want to get sober, right? That's what I want you to do. I want you to get sober right now. right? If that's what you want to do. And for those people who don't want to get sober right now, that's fine. That's your choice, right? But my choice is to be sober today, and is to be sober now, right? And to lead by example. That's right. This is my life. Thank you for watching Jake Showcase, everybody. My name again is Jake Johnston. I hope that you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope that you find this insightful and promising, right? I love y'all. I love all you people out there. Alright? We're going to keep it up. We're going to live the good life. We're all going to do it. Alright? There we go. Thanks for watching Jake Showcase, everybody. Hope you like my video below and subscribe to my channel up above. I do my videos on Wednesdays. And I hope you have a wonderful day.